I am so tired of hearing these Democrats in Congress who just kind of wring their hands and say, oh, well, we just don't have enough votes to do anything. And so there's just nothing we can do about it. And it's like, can you at least try? Use whatever tools you have available to you. Hold hearings, subpoena people, file legislation anyway, even if you don't think you're going to have the votes. Keep filing it. And that way, you can force them to the other side to get on the record and say, like, oh yeah, I'm going to be voting against this thing that will help all the people in my district.
Hey friends, welcome back to the Reasoned Reality Podcast. I'm your host. My name is Joe Smith. Today I am joined by Yen Bailey, who is running for Congress in Florida's Congressional District 2, which means nothing to you all. However, when it was announced there might have been a special election and it was going to help tip the balance of power and all of these things, but that is all up in the air anyway. But I wanted to have her on because campaigns like this are incredibly hard, especially in a state where a lot of people feel like their voice doesn't really change the outcome, and yet people still step forward and do it. So instead of starting with like policy or party talking points, I wanted to start with the person, right? What shapes someone to take that kind of step, right? What keeps them going, and what does grassroots politics actually look like right now from the inside? So, Yen, I'm so glad that you're here and you took the time. We had to juggle a little bit of the scheduling, but you were super flexible and awesome. So I'm super excited about this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me here, Joe. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, the moment that I saw it on social media about the possibility of a special election and how that really could, alter things. And I was just so excited. So the moment I saw that, I Googled like who was jumping in, and then our mutual Dr. Jen Johansson, connected us and stuff. But I am curious, before we jump into your story, I am curious, what makes someone in a state, for those that don't know, Florida is a pretty gerrymandered state. What makes someone jump into that knowing the odds, regardless of like making it through primaries and all of that stuff, just what's waiting for you? What makes somebody jump in anyway?
Yeah, so actually, I ran in 2024. I got in very late. So at the time, really, I had never, ever, ever thought I would be doing anything like this. But so at the time, some friends and I had just started this. It was a nonprofit. It was a voter outreach nonprofit. Our goal was to reach out to rural, working class, youth, communities that we felt were not getting enough attention from the Democratic Party, especially. And so we, didn't really have a voice. We had reached out to people in our local Democratic Party, say, hey, why don't we start canvassing more of these areas? Why don't we reach out? And no one was really interested. They said, there are not enough votes out there. If we just run up the numbers in the urban areas, that's where we should focus our attention, which I did not like. Mm-hmm. And so we were like, well, we can do this on our own. And we were working on that. And I got this call 3 months before the election in 2024, out of the blue. They really just needed someone to run, anyone. And they had called a bunch of other people, like people with real political backgrounds. No one wanted to run because there wasn't enough time, and it's gerrymandered. And after I thought about it a while, I was like, well, I'm already doing this work. This will just give me a better, a broader platform. Yeah. So I said yes. And really, as I was out in all these rural communities, especially, and, like just even in our urban areas, just the um, poor side of town where, there are a lot of people who just said, wow, it has been a long time since anyone has come to talk to us at all from either party. Um, they said it had been years. And there were people who started getting involved in politics again. Um, and, it was so quick. It was just 3 months. And when it was over, especially seeing that, the election went terribly and Trump got elected, um, I wanted to do something about it. I wanted to see how far we could take it. Um, and it would really, at that point, was just about trying to continue that work and keep building infrastructure. And I have a district with 16 counties, and 6 of them had no Democratic Party infrastructure at all. And so I just wanted to help build on that as much as I could, not even really thinking about whether this was winnable or not.
Right. That has been one of my biggest complaints, and I'm not asking you to comment on this because I'm not asking you to get yourself in trouble of any kind. I have just always felt like this from the state level that there's just been so much lacking and support. I won't ask you to comment or say anything about that just because, all the stuff. But like
Sure.
when you say that, I was just like, yeah, that tracks. That tracks.
Yeah.
But before we jump into the politics side of stuff, like, just doing a little bit of reading up on you, your family story is just extraordinary. Like before we started recording, I said that your family story is the definition of what once was the American dream. Refugees from Vietnam, fleeing under like life-threatening circumstances. And I'm curious, growing up, how present was that story in your daily life? Like, was it something that was talked about often or something that you only understood, more deeply later in life? What did that look like?
Yeah. Well, my parents actually didn't talk about their experience a whole lot growing up. Um, I didn't even learn about my dad's story, which really is extraordinary, until I got a lot older and really from some of my other relatives.
Uh-huh.
you know, um, yeah, my dad. So he was a pilot in the South Vietnamese Air Force, and every once in a while I would get some glimpses of, when he would talk a little bit about the war and just, also just being in the trenches and all that stuff, before he became a pilot. And he just, yeah, it sounded like it was not an experience that he really wanted to relive. But yeah, he escaped during the fall of Saigon. He had finished a flight mission. Like he did a night mission, and as he was about to land, when he got this call over the radio that the South was surrendering, and they were going to have to surrender too. And he and his crew decided no. They tried. They did land. They picked up as many people as they could, and they flew off to Thailand, and then they ended up in the U.S. eventually. But yeah. Um, leaving behind their
Yeah.
family. He didn't know what happened to his parents for
Mm.
years afterwards.
Mm. It is interesting. Obviously we come from completely different backgrounds, but my dad was also in Vietnam and it's a lot of the same kind of, where it was like it really wasn't talked about growing up. We knew about it. Every now and then something would happen or he would say something. And it wasn't until much later in life that, any of the stories, any of those things were shared with us. It's only been within the last year to 2 years that I've learned really anything about his time over there. And it's interesting how that's kind of a shared you know, uh, experience, or I don't know if experience is the right word, but just kind of a shared thing that so many people have.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's
So you all ended up. I read on your little biography that you all ended up in Destin, Florida, and that's kind
yeah.
of where you grew up. Um, Now I have not spent a ton of time on in that side of Florida, like the Panhandle and the over there. Um, and I'm over in Gainesville, which is kind of like a hodgepodge of all kinds because the university is right here, so we have a
Mhm.
large international population, which was one of the reasons why we ended up here. Um, but I'm curious what that was like for you growing up. Um, it's a more red area,
Mhm.
uh, you know, culturally more conservative, more, you know, churchy, if that's, you know what I mean? Um,
Yes.
so I'm curious what that was like for you all as a family growing up.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it definitely, so yeah, Destin is an area that, and the reason why we were there is because there is an Air Force base close by, Glenn Air Force Base, and that's the where the refugee camp was. And my parents actually met at the refugee camp. Um, yeah, and they decided to settle down nearby. Most of the other Vietnamese refugees did not. They stayed very very shortly after they got to the US, they kind of dispersed. And so there was really only a handful of Vietnamese families left in that area. And so yeah, there were not a lot of people, not a lot of other Asians in the area. Really not a ton of like people from other
Mhm.
ethnic backgrounds in general in
Yeah.
the area. It's predominantly white, conservative. Of course, my parents were conservative as well. So, I did grow up, actually was a Republican up until uh, I think I officially changed my registration maybe like 15 years ago. But I had been, drifting towards the left long before that. But yeah, it definitely was lonely at times.
Mm.
Just because there were not a lot of other people who shared the same background that I did. We spoke Vietnamese at home, ate Vietnamese food. So, um,
Which is delicious, by the way. We've got a few places here that are Vietnamese food and Vietnamese cooks, like, it's legit, and, oh my gosh, I'm just like, "This is not the stuff I grew up on, man. Mac and cheese sucks." Anyway, that's just neither here nor
like,
there.
yeah, no, it just, but yeah, just it definitely gave me a different perspective.
Mhm. So were your parents, and not knowing, I'm just curious, were they more working class folks? And
Yes, yes.
it's fascinating to me how that influences so much of your life. Because my parents were the same way. They were working class. I inherited, well, didn't inherit, but I grew up under their work ethic, and it just gets seeped into you. Um, and so I'm wondering if that was the same for you. If that's like informing your, because you've been doing public work for a long time. Like, this isn't just your first time doing things in the public eye or the public sector. You've been doing that for a long time. And my thought process was that influenced by watching your parents work growing up and just being instilled with that kind of ethic?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, my parents both worked very hard. Um, my dad, he did maintenance at motels, and took
Mm.
classes at night. He ended up getting his AA and became an electrical technician. And then my mom worked as a seamstress. So, yeah, they just worked very hard, long hours, and they always encouraged me and my brother to really embrace education. They
Mm.
wanted us to be able to do more than they were able to do. And so that was something that was always a huge focus. Um, and and yeah, I made sure to do really well in school. Um, they wanted me to be able to go to college, and I knew from a young age they were like, you need to make sure you get really good grades because we don't have money to
Mm.
send you to college. You're going to have to get a scholarship. Yeah, I ended up being able to get a full tuition scholarship to Tulane, and
Damn.
so it was. And then I went to law school, but I really wanted to just give back. That was another thing. My parents did always do a lot of extra. They tried to help as much as they could.
Yeah.
They didn't have a ton of spare time, but my parents did a lot of like volunteer work with their church, and that kind of thing. And so it was something that they taught me growing up.
It is interesting how, and I think it's something that's lost in our current culture right now. This, but the idea, the story, the whatever of, when an immigrant family comes to the United States and are given the opportunity to do, what your family has been able to do. And then how so often they turn around and give back, you know, um, that's just completely lost right now. Like,
Yeah.
just in this idiotic debate that we're having publicly, um, that story gets lost. It's not told anymore. I mean, every now and then, like maybe with the Olympics or something, and then they tell the story of all this stuff. Yeah, that's great. But in the section of our society where the lawmakers are making laws, that story is not being told.
Right.
There's really not a question there. It's just, you know what I mean? Just an observation of just like, I can remember hearing that, like what you just said was what we were taught growing up is the American dream. Like this is how, the United States was, I understand so much of that is, mythology, and we build things up or whatever, but there's so much truth there.
Absolutely. Yeah. It just, and I still believe in the American dream. And, part of me running, I want to be able to see other people have that same opportunity. This whole idea that if you work hard, you can build a better life for your kids. You know,
Please and thank you.
yes,
Please and
but
thank you.
I think also really, uh, I think America has changed a lot since my parents got here. They did have help when they got here. Um, the American government welcomed the Vietnamese refugees. They set up this refugee camp, and they helped people find. The reason why a lot of the Vietnamese left that area was because the government helped them find other places to settle and find jobs, and set them up in places where they thought that they might have skills that were useful. A lot of people were sent to Iowa where there were farmers because of
Ugh.
their experience rice farming, that kind of thing, um, which we don't. Our current
Yeah,
government is
I
not.
think you got the better end of that deal with
Yeah,
Destin, Florida versus Iowa. I'm
right,
from Missouri. I've been to Iowa and I've been to Destin. Destin's way better.
right,
Yeah.
right.
Well, I would love to ask you about a specific thing that I read about you, about your public work, and I saw something in there about you being a guardian ad litem,
Hmm.
and I have a close friend that does that, and one of the things that and if here in just a minute, if you would kind of explain that for people that don't know what it is,
Hmm.
but that puts someone very close to like human pain,
Hmm.
and so I'm curious that experience and probably others as well. How does that shape the way that you see like policy or policy debates that most people maybe only experience like in an abstract way?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I worked for the Guardian Ad Litem program as a program attorney. And and specifically in the dependency system, and which means so that's the system that um, really works with children who are abused and neglected, and figuring out, you know, how to help those children and their families. Specifically, the Guardian Ad Litem program, um, it's kind of a third party in the system that will look out for the children's best interests. You know, because you have the Department of Children and Families that, they're the ones who go in and kind of take the children out of the family system and figure out how to get them reintegrated if they can. And then you have the parents who are trying to work to get reunited. And then, they have the Guardian Ad Litem program. But yes, you deal with these families that are just going through a lot of turmoil. And I mean,
Mm.
some of the things that I learned working in that system are really how little help some families get. And I think one of the things is how differently certain families are treated. There was certainly a pattern of what types of families were in the system.
I believe that.
Yeah. you know, um, like there were certainly, why is it that only certain mothers are tested for whether there's cocaine in their system? You know, you don't get like a middle class housewife going into, having a baby does not just automatically get their baby does not automatically get tested for cocaine in their system. It does not happen. you know? Um, yeah. So there were certainly things that I kind of had my eyes opened up to
Mm.
working in that
So,
system.
so the second part of that question, how does that help you? I would think that when you're talking policy, there are probably times when a face pops into your mind, like, or a situation that you've
Mhm.
been through. So how does that influence what you support or what you write? Because I think so many of our current politicians, especially, I'm just going to be honest, especially here in the state of Florida, you've got
Mhm.
these jackwagons. Like for me, like I've got Rick Scott and Ashley Moody. Rick Scott, freaking Skeletor, is the worst. Like I just think he's a waste of time. Um, that guy has zero clue
Mhm.
what I experience on a day-to-day basis. He has no idea how difficult it is to watch, utilities go up, and
Mhm.
you've got a certain level of income, and you guys can't keep raising these rates because I don't have anywhere else to pull from. You're
Mhm.
squeezing us out of here, right? So I'm curious how that shapes how you approach things. Maybe not in comparison, but like in
Mhm.
comparison to these career politicians like Rick Scott.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's certainly just be able to see these families firsthand and know what they've been through. It definitely just, like it gives you a whole different perspective. I remember there's one situation that, I think about a lot, where there was a mother who she had two pretty young children. And I mean, she definitely made a mistake, but she left her kids at home to go to work because she was missing too many days of work. And her employer said, if you miss any more work, you're going to lose this job. And, it was not a high paying job, but still it was a job. And she felt like she didn't have a choice. And she left, two pretty young kids at home by themselves to go to work that day. And she had her kids taken. And yeah, she made a mistake, but that was an impossible situation, Like, do you not, do you miss that work and then you lose your job, then you can't pay for food at all or your rent? And, we allow so many families to be in these impossible situations and then we punish them for it. It's, yeah, it, that is something that really should be unacceptable in the greatest country in the world.
The
You know,
richest
the
country in the
richest
world.
country in
Like,
the world.
how's that even a scenario? Right.
Yeah. So, and those are things that we need to fix. And I think a
Oh,
lot of people in Congress, in our government, just don't understand that. They expect that people just should be able to pull themselves up by the
right.
bootstraps, you know? Um,
Which is hilarious because if you look around, there's no bootstraps. You
right,
know what I mean? Like, pull yourself.
right,
Where are they? There are no bootstraps. There's nothing to
right,
pull. Yeah.
right. Yeah.
Uh,
And, I believe in a partnership
yes.
between, the people and the government. And, yes, people should also, you know, put some work in, but if we make the system impossible, give them tools. Um, so yeah,
Yeah.
and
No,
that's
I
what we
feel
need
that
to have is
deeply.
those tools.
Yeah. And I think that resonates. Um, I think that resonates with just people, right? Like, if my guess is if you're just sitting down and you're talking, or maybe you're doing like a town hall or something, and you're especially when you're going into these more rural places where nobody shows up, it doesn't matter if there's a D behind your name or an R, because what you just said meets everybody where they're at. Would that be safe to assume? Like,
Yeah.
I'm assuming, like, if you say
Mhm.
that, you're going to
Right.
have some really positive
Mhm.
conversations.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
Has
I
that
mean,
been in your experience? Like, you've been able to
absolutely.
bridge that gap?
Yes. Yes. I mean, there are so many people who, right, from both sides, who just, everyone wants to be able to, they want to be able to feed their families and want to be able to have a good job to pay their bills. Everyone wants this. Um, you know,
Yeah, I do know.
Yeah. And there are so many people who are really struggling right now and who are really
Yeah.
working hard and still struggling is the thing. I guess sometimes a lot of politicians want to paint this picture like there are just all these lazy people out there just sitting around doing nothing, collecting benefits. Um, here in my district, it's 49%. And that's, the average within this district. There are counties where the numbers are much higher than that, where people are working sometimes more than one job and still can't afford to just pay their bills.
Yeah, I feel that.
Yeah.
Like, over here in Gainesville, I'm in a unique situation, so I'm not comparing mine to somebody else. But I'm like a part-time pastor, and then I'm part-time with a nonprofit, and there are some months where it's just like, well, that bill's just not going to get paid this month because it was summer and our utilities were, somewhere between like $400 and $600, which is ridiculous. So I can't. I feel so deeply for people that don't have access to the things that we do in places like Gainesville. It's not a huge place,
Mhm.
but there's so many more resources here.
Mhm. Yeah.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, let me ask you this. I think one of the big talking points that has come out of, whether it's the 2024 election, they just published an autopsy of that, and the big takeaway that I saw was Gaza really, hurt the Harris
Mhm.
campaign. As a okay, we all saw that coming.
Mhm.
I of course I don't really, especially in face of authoritarianism. I'm not big on purity tests, so we can figure certain things out. But I I would have voted for a wet paper sack in 2024.
Right,
You know what I
right,
mean?
right, yeah.
Um,
Yes.
but that was one of the things. I also think that one of the things that you're seeing a lot of times are these. I think people are sick and tired, especially those on the left, are sick and tired of these corporate establishment Democrats
Mhm.
that are in leadership positions when we've got somebody that's going scorched earth on the country, and all we see is like the hand wringing and the strongly worded letters and emails. Um, and then there's rumors that there might be uh, an establishment Democrat running where you are. And so I'm curious, for our listeners and stuff, what sets you apart from that, right? Like what is the thing that sets you apart from, because I guess you would be considered a grassroots candidate. Would that
Mhm.
be
Oh, yeah.
accurate? Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah. So what's the
absolutely, yes.
difference? So
Yeah.
can you explain what the difference for people is?
Yeah, and yeah, I absolutely, I think one of the things that has really, I think one of the things that's really ruined the Democratic Party was Citizens United.
Mm.
Um, I think, money and power has always been a part of politics, but I think really it has become even more so, you know, since Citizens United allowed really unlimited money to pour into politics. And, you have these Democrats who are in power now who they feel like they need to keep their deep pocket donors happy. And so they are not willing to speak out um, on issues that they should be speaking out on because they want to keep their donors happy. And that is something, and that is why that is one of the focuses of my campaign is to bring accountability back. We need to we need to overturn Citizens United. We need to have term limits so that there are not these people who are just in there for decades, just building power, building all of these connections, no fresh ideas, making sure that um, there needs to be some sort of time limit after someone leaves Congress before they can jump into lobbying.
Or can we just make that a legal period? Can we just get rid of lobbyists?
Right?
Anyway, yeah, this
Yeah.
is your story. This is your campaign, not mine.
Yeah. Banning the stock trading in Congress, just, and I do believe that there are people in Congress who do have good intentions, certainly going into it. But can we at least get rid of these temptations? Because even people with the best intentions um, can rationalize things,
Well, what
especially
is that for?
when all of these things are presented.
Sorry, I was just saying. What is that? That saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So s- I, as you were talking, I was just thinking, if I sat down with my more conservative friends, and I have been able to hold on to a few of them, not many, but a few of them. Um, if I sat down next to them and said, I think that we've got to get dark money billionaires out of our politics. I think this 1%, this, what they're being called now, the Epstein class, which I
Yeah.
love,
Yeah. Right.
is ruining politics. I think that we need to create term limits for everybody so that we don't have career politicians just, taking advantage and getting rich off of this stuff. The things that you just said, I don't think there's a single one of them that would disagree.
Right. They shouldn't.
Right.
Right.
I honestly don't think that a single one of them would disagree with what you just said.
Mm-hmm.
Which to me goes to show that those aren't progressive air quotes,
Right.
progressive politics, but that
Right.
goes to show just how common sense so many of the progressive
Mm-hmm.
ideas are.
Right. Right. Yeah. Like it should not be a radical idea that a public servant should be there to serve the public, right? Like it shouldn't be a radical idea that, you're not sending someone to Congress to get richer, or become a
Um,
celebrity. Um, like
yeah.
these are not radical ideas.
No, they're not. They're not. So let me ask you this. So let's say everything breaks your way and you're elected and you are, Florida District's 2 congressperson. What are the things, like, what are your priorities? What are the things that you're wanting to accomplish for your people?
Hmm. Yeah. Well, so the very first thing, and this is not a sexy idea, but I believe in setting up really strong, excellent constituent services in my district. you know, um, that is something that has been poorly lacking with our current congressman. I hear from so many people who say they have tried to reach out and have never gotten any response. Um, and that's unacceptable. you know, that should be, so there is no point in going to Washington and getting appropriations, getting money for these programs, and then none of it actually makes it back to your district.
Mm.
Because the people don't know how to access it. There are all these grant programs out there that no one actually knows about. And then even if they do know about it, they don't know how to navigate that process. Um, and so making sure that there is accessible staff that can help people through that process. And I have a really large district. It's 16 counties. So setting up mobile offices, those types of things. And that is something that any congressperson can do no matter who is in power in Congress. They should
Mm.
always, be there to serve their constituents well. And then holding town halls, letting people know why you are, why you vote the way they do, making sure that people can tell you what they want, like what is important to them, you know, um, just answering phone calls. These are all things that I really want to, so that's one of the first things, because I think no matter what else happens, that is something that that would totally be within my control.
Yeah.
Um,
It's funny you say that. So where I live, I'm in Kat Kamek's district.
oh, yeah.
And talk about somebody else who's the worst of the worst. Um, I find, and I will say this because this is my show. You don't have to say anything. I find her abhorrent. Abhorrent. I think she is vile. That she would withhold, create systems that withhold healthcare that she has access to, and we all know what we're talking about.
Mhm.
That woman will not hold a town hall anywhere close to Gainesville. We invited her to one. I say we, I mean the town, like not me personally. And it ended up being an empty chair. Will not do it. Will not do it. And I understand that she has that red base in the other, the more red areas, the more red counties in the state. will not come to Alachua County, even though this is like the seat, where she is. And I can't tell you how many times I have called or emailed, and I might get a hold of a staffer every now and then. But most of the time, it just either goes to email or to voicemail, or the voicemail is full, so you can't leave anything. And all you get from an email is an automatic response that's, you can set your Gmail to do that, right?
Mhm.
Nothing. Not a single word. So I love what you just said. And, and it may be labeled unsexy, but it's the freaking job.
Right. Right. Yes. Yeah. That is the job, right? To represent your constituents. How do you represent them if you don't talk to them? It's just mind-boggling. Yeah. I mean, Neil Dunn, he held two town halls at the very beginning, like when he was first elected. And they did not go well for him. This was when, the ACA was, and apparently people got very fired up. So he had a lot of really hard questions. Has not held one since then until this year. He held one telephonic town hall.
She does that too. And then they cherry pick who.
Yes. Yeah. Surprisingly, like, only certain people are calling into this. Yeah. So, yeah. And so that is something, regular town halls.
Well, let me ask you, how do we fix that? Right? Like, now you're going to do that, right? You get voted in, you're going to do that. You just said that. And I'm sure that you said that everywhere you go, right? Like
Mhm.
that's a sticking point. You may call it unsexy. To me, it's a big deal. Well, you just said it was a big deal. I'm not saying that. But how do we fix that? Right? Like, it can't just be dependent on you to want to do that, right?
Mhm.
Is there a way to fix that?
I mean, as far as how can we
Yeah,
as members of the
accessibility, like
public.
but a representative actually
Right.
showing back up to the place they represent and hearing from the people they're supposedly representing. Is there a way to fix that
I
where it's
mean,
not happening?
uh, I think just putting on that pressure, and finding different ways to put on the pressure, with our representatives, at every level, making sure that they hear us and, just keep making the phone calls, keep
Mm.
sending in the emails, keep showing up at their offices, you know, and just and not stopping and finding different ways to do things, and I think the same is true of our members in Congress. I am
Yeah.
so tired of hearing these Democrats in Congress who just kind of wring their hands and say, "Oh, well, we just don't have enough votes to do anything. And so there's just nothing we can do about it." And it's like, can you at least try? Use whatever tools you have available to you. Hold hearings, subpoena people, file legislation anyway, even if you don't think you're going to have the votes. Keep filing it. And that way, you can force them to the other side to get on the record and say, like, "Oh yeah, I'm going to be voting against this thing that will help all the people in my district." you know um yeah, get them on the record, get their votes. It
Well,
just
why do you think they do that? Is it just really boiled down to, like, I don't want to rock the apple cart. I don't, my big donors. It does it really just boil down to that?
I mean, I'm certainly not in their heads, but I yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of people are just afraid of making certain people unhappy. Not they don't want to take uh controversial
Mhm.
positions on things.
Now, I know this is not the same, but this is my personal experience, right? So I have zero empathy or sympathy for people like that. Zero. I grew up very conservative, very red, very traditional, deconstructed all the religious aspects of that and landed where I landed. And doing so, when we publicly came out, the big thing was, because I'm still a pastor,
Mhm.
uh, as open and affirming, which means that queer inclusion, that queer people have zero ceiling of belonging. You're not disqualified from anything just because you're queer.
Mhm.
Um, and when we did that, holy cow, we lost. And this isn't comparable. I'm not comparing my story to any of my queer friends, right? Not even remotely the same. And yet, and also, we still lost a lot of relationships, still lost a lot of networks, lost a lot of support. Um, uh, but it was the right thing to do, right?
Right.
It was the right thing to do. So you do it anyway. Like, okay, well, there are going to be consequences, but it's still the right thing to do. So when I hear that, like, even if I won't say any names, but let's just say one of the leaders goes out on a limb because it's the right thing to do and they lose support. You're going home to a bank account worth
Right.
more money than I will ever see in my life. Shut up.
Right. 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 And I mean, it's like, what is the point of being there to begin with if you are not going to do work? If you are not going to take difficult positions, it, you're
You're
not
preaching.
there just to sit there and you know send out a social media post every once in a while. Like that's not what you're getting paid to do. So what is
How
the
married how married are you guys to where you live? I know lots of places over in the Gainesville area that are, open to buy. I'm just saying. I'm just gonna leave that, plant that seed. Anyway. Well, let me ask you this, because I know that one of the things that politics is kind of known for is how nasty it can get, right? Just mean and the things that can be said. And I think over the last decade, it's gotten even worse, because we've got a pedophile president who loves to say just the worst things about people, and for some reason the press just doesn't call him out on it for some reason. And then the entire party, the Republican Party, just kowtowed and swallows whatever he gives them. So I'm curious. I know that, probably in your background with the work that you've done, you've probably been able to build up, a thick skin to some of that, kind of resist some of that. But are you experiencing that now already? How are you preparing for that? What do you do to center yourself? Does the question make sense? I'm curious how you stay centered in a job that just probably pulls your nervous system in a million different directions all the time.
well, I mean, as far as getting negative comments from people, yeah, I mean, like I, and maybe I'm in kind of a unique position where, I have grown up always being like the different person, like the one who is unlike everyone else in the room. I have had my fair share of negative comments thrown at me um, from people that I knew and people that I didn't know, you know. Um, and so I don't know, that kind of stuff really just rolls off my back. I mean, I don't let negative comments affect me, you know.
Mm.
It just doesn't bother me at all. Um, yeah, I
It
mean,
takes For
I
anybody
don't.
listening, it takes a very healed person to be able to do that. So kudos to you for being able to get to a point in your life where those things don't deter you, that they don't echo in your brain. So I mean, seriously, a lot of the work that I do locally is with these deconstruction groups, helping people untangle fundamentalism. And for so many of them, it takes years of work to be able to get to a point where they can say, okay, those things no longer affect me as they once did. So, I mean, I don't want people to bat an eye at what you just said. Like, that's a big deal. So, and I think it also speaks to the kind of politician that you're going to be. Because you're not only are you not going to participate in that, but those things won't deter you from the work that you know that you've got to do.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Well, let me ask you this. I want to honor your time. We're creeping up to an hour here. For those that maybe don't know you, right? Like they're not in your district, so why would they know who you are? Kind of deal. I think a lot of people know people like Kat Kammick just because they're so far out there, right? Like you're just like,
Right.
I mean, not making national headlines for just the stupidest stuff. But if somebody was like, well, who's Yin Bailey? What are the things that she's really passionate about? What are the things that she wants me to know that will affect my life? What would those things be?
Yeah. Well, I mean, like I said, accountability is one that is very important to me, and something that I do really, I think, want to focus, because I think really we're never going to be able to fix a lot of the problems that we want to fix until we get a government that actually works for people, you know? So yeah, I mean, I feel like that should be top priority. Um, I've been an ethics lawyer. I spent most of my career in ethics. And so that's something that is just important to me in general.
Sorely needed, lacking.
Yes. Um, I, I guess my decisions will always be based on what is going to be best for people. The people who actually live in this district in our country, the people who are, yeah, and not corporations, special interests, and what is the most compassionate approach to
I love that.
things.
Yeah, I love that. I forgot to ask you. I wanted to ask you this, and I know we don't have a ton of time left, but while you were talking, it popped in my brain because I was thinking, there's a fine line between listening to your constituents, right? And doing doing the thing that you think is best for them, right? Even if they're asking for something that would be against their best interest, which we see just way too much right now. And which this is my thought process. So I'm thinking
Mhm.
about that.
Mhm.
And then I'm thinking about the fact that you are a grassroots candidate and that you do run on accountability and ethics, which means that you don't take, money from certain places and stuff, which then led to the fact that we live in a gerrymandered state. And I think a lot of people are curious, how difficult is that for somebody to actually be a grassroots candidate and go up against special interests everywhere? What is that like?
It it is hard. It's definitely hard. I mean, yeah, fundraising is not easy. It's certainly, I have, well, I mean, I will not take money from, a lot of these special interest groups anyways. But so that, it's just grassroots money. But even the people who are, um, like involved in politics, who are not like rich people, but, even those
Uh-huh.
people are always very skeptical, about
Mhm.
whether they should even donate their $100 to this campaign because, oh, it's a red district. Is it going to be winnable anyways? Is this just a lost cause? And I always tell people, look, and I mean, at this point, I do not believe this is a lost cause. I mean, the way that elections are going, this is absolutely a winnable
100%.
district. 100%. Yes. I completely believe that this, we can do this. And this, it is gerrymandered. It's an R+8 district, really. So it's really not,
But that's not insurmountable anymore. I
yeah,
mean,
that's
because
not
we've seen,
insurmountable right now.
yeah,
Yeah.
we've
I
seen
mean,
districts much deeper red than that.
right. I mean, things
Flip.
are shifting like
Mhm.
14, 17, right next door, we had a special election in District 1 where it shifted 17 points. It
Which is
wasn't
insane.
enough to change there because that was like a
But my
plus
goodness.
33, but still,
Yeah,
that's amazing. Like,
that's a huge swing.
yeah, right. So yes, we can absolutely flip this district, if we can turn out enough voters. Um, but like even without all of that, I'm like, we will never be able to shift if we don't try, if
Mhm.
people just give up, you know, um, we've got to keep pushing to make that change. And I think more than anything else, we need more leaders who will fight even when things look hopeless.
Mm.
And I think part of, what we have right now is we have too many leaders who spend too much time looking at the odds, looking at, well, we don't have enough votes. There's no point in even trying to do this because we're just not going to have enough support. And it's like, well, is this the right thing? Because if it is, we need to fight for it, because
I do. I love that. I love that. And I 100% agree. I think that right now, because I said for a while, well, I've said for a long time, I'm not the only person to ever say this, but authoritarianism, fascism, whatever label you want to put to it, always overreaches. Always overreaches. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing the MAGA movement, the Trump administration has been overreaching for some time. And it's now, beginning to all crumble, and I find it's going to be poetic justice just to the nth degree that it's going to be emails that takes him down. But you see that overreach and people are like, whoa, what? There's a whole side conversation that could happen about like all of the people finally waking up, right? Like
Mhm.
we've been telling you for
Right,
years
right.
now.
Yes.
And so that's a whole side conversation. However, people are waking up and MAGA is crumbling. It's falling apart. He will always have his diehards. But I think that it's also because of, like you just said, people like you who said, it doesn't matter if it looks hopeless. We're going to do it anyway. We're going to hold the roll call anyway. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We're going to get it down on paper. And I love that. I love that. Let me ask you. I got just a few questions, and then I'm going to let you go and
Sure.
get out there to do whatever it is that you need to do. I know you're busy. Outside of campaigning and policy, right?
Mhm.
When this campaign is over, win or lose, what do you hope that your kids remember from this or learn from this?
Yeah. I want them to just remember that um, I was presented with a situation that was difficult and that seemed hopeless. With just the odds were definitely stacked against me, and I didn't back down from that. I want them to know that I was brave, and I want them to do the same thing. And I felt like it was something that was worth fighting for, and I did it anyways.
I love that. That's such a good answer. That's such a good answer. And it's so important. I mean, even not just for your kids, but for all of us right now, right? Like, even if it does seem hopeless, and we just said that, but you're like living that out, you're embodying that right now. So I really, really appreciate that answer. Here's my final question for you. And if you don't have an answer off the top of your head, that's totally fine. But for listeners who kind of feel powerless, who are feeling that hopelessness right now, if they were to ask you one thing that they could do, what do you think would be, or what piece of advice, like one small act of citizenship that you think could help with that, you think still matters?
Yeah. I mean, I think just just taking that first small step anywhere, just like, even if it's just sending one email or leaving one voicemail for, your representative, or sharing a social media post that you think was impactful. Um, all of those things make an impact, or just talking to your neighbor. Talking to your neighbor, I feel like, is one of the most important things, I mean, gosh, I feel like, because that's really where people have the most influence, is with their friends, people who actually know them. I tell people, like, you just talking to your book club is much more valuable than like
Mm.
$1,000 paid ad. you know? Um, yeah. So yeah, just taking those small steps, it makes a difference.
I think that people think that because the problem is big, the solution has to be equally big. And I
Mhm.
think most people forget the fact that those big solutions don't happen all at one time. Like, it's
Mhm.
not one person doing one big thing. It's a ton of people doing all these little things, right? Like, if you look at the civil rights movement, of course you've got these leaders and these big names and stuff, but there was a faceless, nameless army behind them that so many of their stories we'll never know, that canvassed, that sat in places, that rode buses. We just had a meeting last week it was a planning meeting. We got a big citywide meeting for our next No Kings rally.
Mhm.
And the group of people that it's called the programming committee, they kind of set the program. And so we met last week. And after it was over, I just sat back and was thinking, history will not know these people's names. History will not remember their names, most likely.
Mhm.
And yet they're heroes. They're
Absolutely.
heroes.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Yes. And I mean, yeah, I certainly could not do any of what I'm doing without my team, my volunteers, you know. Yeah, I'm really just the face, but it is all of those people who really make it happen. And
Yeah.
yeah, sometimes it's better, there's I don't know, maybe even more honor in that they're not getting like anything out of it other than just helping, just
Yes. Yes. So here's my encouragement to everybody that's listening. Yen, we're going to, in the show notes, we're going to have the links for all of the stuff, so people can come find you. They can donate or follow you, or share any of those kinds of stuff, even if they're not in your district. So my encouragement for all of you listeners is to go to those show notes to find that. I'm going to ask you to donate. Like $5, $10. It's tight for everybody, but if you can spare that and you can help flip a or a red district blue in the state of Florida, I have argued this forever. What starts in Florida doesn't stay in Florida. It has spread throughout the country. We are the birthplace for MAGA. We are the birthplace for Moms for Liberty. So it's important for people across the country to understand it matters if you're in Iowa and you donate $10 here, because what happens here is going to creep towards Iowa eventually. So I'm going to encourage you guys to go to Yen's website and to find find out more about her, to donate if you feel led to do so. But Yen, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come on here and to talk to us and to I felt like this wasn't, a typical kind of, you're a human, right? And that came across, and it means a lot that you would take the time to do that and to kind of just open up and show people who you are. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you for just having me on your show. I really like just talking to you. So
Yeah, it was fun. I'm going to keep in touch. I've been watching anyways, but I'd love to keep in touch. And as stuff gets closer, depending on what actually happens, we'd love to have you back on and kind of maybe some updates. Or I'm working behind the scenes to get some more people. Maybe do like a panel. I'd love to just really dive into some stuff that makes a difference in people's lives. But again, I'll shut up. I just thank you so much for all that you're doing. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Well, friends, thanks for following along. Like I said, hit those show notes. Go follow all of the things. Even if you're from afar, let's support Yen and what she's trying to do. Drive up her social media, all presence and all this stuff. Thanks for following along, you guys. I hope that this conversation was as encouraging to you as it was to me. And I also hope that wherever you find yourself today, that you are having the exact day that you need. Friends, don't forget, you may be the only voice of reason that somebody hears today, so don't be afraid to use it. All right, y'all, have a great day. Until next time.